Welcome to Farming Matters, the storytelling series where we get to hear from innovative farmers and ranchers across the North Central region. Each one has had a SARE grant. Today we're going to hear from Tom Ruggieri about his elderberry work. My name is Liz Brownlee. I coordinate the Farmer Rancher Grant Program, and I'm the host of this series. I'm here with Marie, our director and producer.
Hello, all.
And, if you don't know SARE well yet, SARE stands for Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education. And every project that we fund has both an on-farm trial type aspect as well as a sharing out initiative to spread the word about what the farmers learned. And that's what Tom's going to do with us today. Um, I think we should turn it over to him without further ado.
Hi, I'm Tom Ruggieri, Fair Share Farm. Our farm is located in northeast Clay County, Missouri, north of Kansas City. This is my wife, Rebecca Graff. We met on a CSA farm in upstate New York, Piecework Organic, back in 2001, where she was apprenticing to come back to her family farm and preserve farmland and build community. And so we've been doing that for almost 25 years together. And so we had a CSA for 18 years, and that's, a generation of that is kind of tiring, and we're working towards a more sustainable kind of physical farming and process. And so we opened a fermentation kitchen actually in 2016 for live culture vegetable ferments, and then slowly got to the point where the vegetables that we raised were only for our vegetable fermentation. And then in 2020, I'm gonna switch down to this one. In 2020, we realized that we're in rolling hills of Missouri, and it's really not prime vegetable growing farmland. Our topsoil, we have a clay subsoil down around 10 inches. And so with the rains we seem to get, with climate change and erratic weather, was really a problem. And so we read Mark Shepard's book, Restoration Agriculture. And in 2020, we put in over 8,000 linear feet of berms and swales. And now we do this alley cropping, which works well. That allows us to have all our alleys to be sloped at 1% slope. So kind of all our planting ground is at the same slope, and it's helped tremendously. And so along with that, we're really moving towards a perennial system, chestnuts and persimmons, and then elderberries. And so figuring if we have elderberries, what should we do with them? And so the idea is to make wine and then vinegar out of it. I'd made a lot of wine before when I lived in upstate New York, straight from the grapes. So I was familiar with that, made elderberry wine here once, and it turned into vinegar, and the vinegar was great. It was like 10, 12 years ago, and so that kind of notion stuck in our head. So thankfully, SARE exists, and so it was a great way to kind of explore this idea of doing it for a small farm. We're really trying to search for kind of craft, value-added processes, especially live culture and fermenting, that we can do on our farm, and then hopefully show other folks that it's a good value-added type of process to add to your farm. Our vegetable ferments, we have a kitchen without a stove, so there's a lot of kind of benefits to it all, energy-wise and otherwise. So to do this, we need to get a winery permit to make vinegar from scratch. You take a juice of whatever it is you have, and you convert it into alcohol, wine, cider, whatever. You have to have a permit for that in Missouri from the feds and from the state. And then how do you actually make the vinegar? So we did some research online. There's some equipment that can be bought from folks in Austria. There's different ways you could make it. So we evaluated a couple different ways. And it's like, okay, well, if we can actually make it, what can we say about it? And so the University of Missouri helped us to evaluate the health chemistry of the finished product and all the intermediate products too, as well as whether people would actually like it, the culinary benefits and just the public demand for it. So this is a picture of the checklist of what the state of Missouri requires for the winery. So that seems to be a stumbling block to a lot of people having to deal with the government um, and this type of thing. But really, for a winery, they want to know that you're who you say you are, that you're where you say you are, and that if you're making alcohol, they could come in anytime and review it and make sure that you're not getting by without paying excise tax. So it's all about taxes. It's not about really health and safety or anything, or even your processes that you use. And so the federal requirements are very much the same. You have to prove that you don't have a sales tax or any type of tax in arrears, that you have either a lease or ownership of the property where your facility is, things like that. And there's some bonding that we had to do with the state. And then a lot of this depends on your size too, as to whether you have some other requirements. So we did all that, and we got our winery permits from the TTB, the Tax and Trade Bureau of the U.S. Department of Treasury, and from the Missouri Department of Alcohol and Tobacco Control. So then we were off and on our way. And so the first step is to get elderberries and to juice them. We got ours from Terry Durham at River Hills Harvest in Missouri. He's been championing American elderberry production in Missouri for over 2 decades. And so it was really nice to have a source for organic berries because we don't have enough growing on our land right now. You can see this winemaking equipment. So this is kind of hobby scale. This press actually was my great grandparents, so this is over 100 years old. I used it a lot for winemaking, so I was familiar with it. So it was one way that kind of getting into this project, I didn't have a lot of trepidation. I just didn't know how things were going to turn out. So yeah, you get the berries and you press them into juice, and then well, then you convert it into wine. And so the wine, we simply do that. We had just a large 50-gallon plastic food grade barrel, and you ferment it. It takes about a week, and all the sugars are converted to alcohol, and then you rack that off and you let that wine sit for a while so any solids kind of settle, and then you have your starting product for your vinegar. Ours is actually more like a cider. We ferment it to about 6% alcohol because your alcohol content kind of matches your vinegar acidity. You have to be at least 4% acidity to be considered a vinegar. According to the FDA, something like apple cider vinegar is about 5% acidity. And so we shoot for between 5 and 6% acidity. And some of that's done by adding sugar so that we can have an alcohol content that we want. So yeah, you make wine and then you make vinegar. So vinegar is an aerobic process. Wine, you don't want any air getting in there. You buy a cultured yeast usually to convert your sugars to alcohol. But then it's a bacteria, not a yeast, that does the conversion of the alcohol into acetic acid. So acetobacter, acetic acid bacteria, AAB is another term they use. And so there's numerous ways that you can do that, and it's been done for centuries. In the late 1700s, there were some ways that were a little more mechanical. One is called the generator process. This is a modern version of it, kind of a lab scale, but it works. We bought this from an organization called Molly Schmeckel in Austria. They sell this equipment. So you can see what's going on is the tub below has the wine and already some vinegar in it mixed. We have it in this blanket because you want to keep it at about 80 degrees. That's a good temperature for vinegar. And what you see in this column is essentially small stones, zeolite, not much different than cat litter really. It has a lot of surface area. And so there's a pump there on the right and there's a timer. So for 15 minutes every 3 hours, the pump turns on and it pumps the vinegar wine mixture over this um, media, and that's where the bacteria live, the mother of vinegar, basically, that does the conversion. And so you keep track of that. On the left there, you can see a barrette and some kind of lab equipment. You got to learn how to do acidity testing so you can keep track of how well you're doing. And so, this is a little tricky, but this is a very dependable system. Here's a graph of one of our batches. I've run, I don't know, lots of batches in the last 2 years now, and they pretty consistently follow this graph. It's usually a pretty straight shot from a lower acidity like the 3.5% up to almost 5.5 in this case, um, and so that gives a lot of confidence too that this system works. And what you would do is you'd run a batch. You kind of have to start with maybe a third to a half of your batch be vinegar and the other half wine. You have to be kind of acidic to start with. So you'd run a batch like this. Says it's 4 gallons that I did on this one, and then when I was done, I'd probably take out 2 to 3 gallons and then fill it back up to 4. And you'd have active bacteria in that column, and you would just start it back up. So it's a very dependable system, which is one of the things to kind of learn about. It's like, well, can you really do this and feel confident that you're not going to be throwing out a lot of batches of things if you're looking at this as a product you want to sell and produce. Now this is what's called an Orleans barrel that we developed. So back in the late 1700s in France, what they did, there was a lot of wine that could go bad at the port of Orleans in France, and so they decided that it'd be a good way to just make vinegar out of it if it was already going bad. Um, so what you actually do is you cut a hole kind of near the top and either side of the barrel, and you fill it up halfway, and you put a screen on those holes so the air can get in there, and you just let it sit. It's kind of a static process, just like it almost looks like a SCOBY that you get. I have this tube with the cork on the top because you want to fill and draw from the bottom so that this mother of vinegar floats in the system. And this is kind of a neat picture of it from the inside. So this is a barrel about halfway full. On the left, this was, I don't know, maybe a day or so after we filled it with a mixture of half vinegar and half wine. And the mother of vinegar just starts forming. Mother of vinegar is actually it's cellulose. It's a byproduct of the conversion of the sugar or the alcohols into acetic acid. And then over time, you see on the right, it gets even more kind of gel-like. And so I draw samples out of that and get a graph like this. And it's kind of the same thing. It's a pretty straight line graph. And then this one, it levels off. And then you know that you've reached your, you've converted all the alcohol to acetic acid. You don't want to go past that point because then the acetic acid can dissipate and the vinegar isn't as good. So this was kind of fun because it was, this old method and wasn't really sure how it was going to work. We had like 15 gallons in there, so I had to make 15 gallons of vinegar or at least 7 gallons of vinegar before I could even do the process so I could have a 50-50 mix of wine and vinegar. And it just happened. So, these are natural processes, and if you get the hang of them and you have a clean system, there is some dependability to it. Though, it's a craft, so there's a lot to learn and a lot of mistakes you can make, but you can also figure those out. So this is maybe a little hard to completely understand, but give me a minute to explain this graph. So this is the GC mass spec, the analytical testing that the University of Missouri did on the wine we started, or the juice we started with, the wine that we got, and then the vinegar. You see on the left, it's called a heat map. So down the right side is a list of compounds that they found in these products that are beneficial. And then each column is one of the tests that we did. So you can see over there on the left is the juice. So those compounds at the top of this heat map, the juice column has red, and that means that these were relatively out of all these at the higher values. So, and then down at the bottom, the products down at the bottom, really, there wasn't a lot of it in the juice, and you can see the values are more blue. And then as you move across into all the different mixes of whether it was a vinegar or wine that we made, you can see that the things that were a high value in the juice actually cooled down, and there were less of them. But some of the important compounds that were in the juice that are blue, they were low values, actually warmed up. So it means they increased in value. And you can kind of look at that little spreadsheet there. So I picked out one compound, quercetin. It's a known antioxidant. A lot of people are familiar with it. So in the juice, it was about 230,000 parts per billion of quercetin. Whereas if you go into the wine and the vinegar, you can see it's almost, in some cases, it's a tenfold increase. So this was really one of the more interesting aspects of this. It was really lucky that, the University of Missouri is working on this Advancing American Elderberry project. They're familiar with analyzing elderberries, elderberry juice. If we were a small business, we couldn't have just hired them to do this. So SARE was just, the connections, the collaboration that SARE promotes. It was just a great benefit to be able to do this and to learn this. The Orleans bucket was simply a food grade bucket that we filled up partially with the vinegar and wine mixture and just like covered it with a cloth and let that sit. So it's a stat, you can do that in a jar. I'm doing that now in glass rather than that bucket when we do it. You can do it on
Mhm.
smaller batches. So it's like when people make kombucha, you could do that in the same type of container. You can see we have wine from juice and wine from pumice. So when we press the berries, we get a straight juice that comes out of it. You saw in that wine press picture. And then you have all those seeds and skins, and there's a lot of juice still in there. And so what we do with that is we add some sugar water to it to kind of thin it out, and we create a second wine that has whatever came out of the pumice there. And so we run those separately. One's a little more first run and pure than the other one. And so for right now, we're blending the two of them together in the end to get a vinegar that's around, well, it's over 5% acidity. And this is kind of, in their words, their summary, the higher concentrations of specific compounds in vinegar suggest that it may offer benefits different from those to juice and wine. So this is almost like a little teaser project, but it does show that, these changes that fermentation brings about, they're real and they look repeatable. And so it's a good place to do more research. And then another part of the project, we'd originally just thought that we would make a couple cards with questions on it and hand them out, have people taste our stuff at our farmers market. But working with MU Extension, and Whitney Schmidt, who was one of the staff there, she's been in viniculture before, and so she was very interested in this. And so we developed a tasting survey together, and we did it at 4 different events. And so part of the survey, what I wanted to do was let people just say in their own words what they thought of it. And so we asked people, use 3 words to describe what you just tasted. And so all these words just came out of people's heads. And so this was really exciting. It uh, it was a hit. Nobody was really turning their nose up at it. It's very strong, so it took us a while to figure out a good way to get people to sample it without choking on it. Um, but we feel that all these comments, descriptions were very positive and kind of right on the money, I think, as far as what we felt too. Because it is strong, it's more acidic than apple cider vinegar. Um, it's very bold, and like it says, they're purple. It can barely see the sun through it if you hold a bottle up to the sun. So it's its own thing. Um, and so that's kind of what this is. When I put this picture together, I realized, oh, the word raw American elderberry vinegar is in three different spots on this. And that's kind of part of the point of what we're trying to do is string those words together. They might not have ever been strung together for all I know. And we brand it. So we're in the point now where we're selling it. Terry at River Hills Harvest, he's buying our stuff wholesale. He has an online market. And we've settled on kind of two methods. One is the generator, and the other is a static method. So I'm not using the barrel at this time. I'm actually using like a big glass jar or even a large 5 or 10 gallon crock to do it. Trying to stay away from plastic as much as I can. We're learning more and more about good ways to use it. I like to use it to season food. It's strong. It is like a balsamic. It's really a fresh balsamic. Balsamic means that it's restorative and curative. So it does have beneficial health properties, which is what MU proved. And then the tasting survey proved that it has good culinary properties. And so we're at the point now where we're trying to figure out a way to really scale up and brand this product and create kind of a new high end and high value and high quality raw or American elderberry uh, product.
Because I was curious, like what's next? But it sounds like scaling up um, is a piece of it. Is there anything else that you feel like is on the horizon next for where you want to take what you learned from your SARE project?
I think that another thing we really want to do is to be able to describe the data that we have better. It's a value added product, and it's like, what is the value? We don't want to just say, oh, it's good for you. It's made out of elderberries. We want to be able to like say what that is. The whole idea of food is medicine. I'd like to be able to say, you can get X, milligrams per liter of antioxidants out of this.
But your grant was for $15,000. And I'm wondering how much of this work was covered by the grant specifically.
Well, it was really helpful because it did cover the equipment and there was time left over for labor. I spent a lot more labor on it, but we also had a product that we were able to sell. So, it was kind of a Kickstarter thing almost for us. And if it didn't go, then we wouldn't really have lost anything. But the generator, I think it was like $1,500. I don't know what it would be now. It's coming from Europe, so it's hard to say with kind of anything. But and then I didn't have to buy a bunch of big glass jug carboys, or I didn't have to buy a press. So if you were starting from scratch, you may have to invest in equipment that a home winemaker might already have. And then MU, I got a quote about the lab tests, and then when I went back to them, they were like, well, that was kind of really only part of the analysis. It didn't include like you have to do it in triplicate and some other things, but they covered it because that's kind of their charge with the Advancing American Elderberry. So and I don't know what those were, that those costs, but and I think we ended up spending $2,500 on the berries. We bought like 500 pounds at $5 a pound from River Hills Harvest. Um, so that's those are the costs.
Are there any specific resources or guides that you're like, if you're going to do this, this is the go-to resource or guide?
The
Farmer.
company is Molly Schmeckel. So they have a store. They have all this equipment available on the store, and then they have online courses.
It was really a pleasure to learn from you, Tom. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm glad that you all are doing this.